Welcome to Dysfunctionally Yours, the podcast where we embrace the chaos, laugh through the struggles, and find hope on the other side of trauma. I'm your host, Brittany, and if you've ever felt like your life was a beautifully messy roller coaster of dysfunction, trust me, you're in good company. Here, we'll have real, raw, and sometimes ridiculous conversations about mental health, relationships, and healing, because let's be honest, life isn't always pretty, but that doesn't mean we can't come out of it stronger and maybe even smiling. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of bubbles, and let's navigate this wild journey together, dysfunctionally, but never alone.
Welcome back, friends. How's everybody been? I'm Brittany. Hello. This is Dysfunctionally Yours. I must say, I absolutely love whenever I accomplish like a grown-up task. I know that I am a grown-up, but I don't identify as a grown-up. And so whenever I accomplish a grown-up task, I get very, very, very excited about it. Like, for example, especially things that I don't want to do, like going to Costco. So when I go to Costco, I get very excited about it. Like, oh God, look what I did. I deserve a reward. I reward myself every time I go, whether it's with like pizza at the end or a special coffee treat before I get there or whatever. I just think that I deserve a reward, a whole gold star reward for doing what other grown-ups do for fun. I want a reward. So I do love that. Obviously I went to Costco. So hence the statement. I don't love, though, that my neighbors keep adding decorations to their yard. So now in front of their yard or in their yard, they have Halloween decorations, they have Thanksgiving decorations, they have Christmas decorations, they have some birthday decorations, and they have Valentine's decorations all in their yard. And I am bothered by it. I'm like, you come out here, you know that it doesn't match. And I think that's probably, it doesn't bother me so much that they have Halloween decorations out, because at the end of the day, I don't care. I don't care. You do you, whatever makes you happy, right? Like, I don't care that it is past the holiday. That is not what is bothersome to me. It is bothersome to me because none of them match. Your Halloween stuff does not match. Your Christmas stuff does not match. Your Valentine's Day stuff. It just is like chaos, and it bothers me whenever I walk by it. They've also added all of these pictures like that they printed off of their computer and laminated and hung up everywhere. Every surface that they can put a picture on, they have, and it is of a Rottweiler barking, and so it looks like a very angry Rottweiler. Which, why is that what you picked? But the wording on it that they've typed up is telling people to pick up after their dogs, which I've talked about that before. Like, I do not know why people around me are not picking up after their dogs. So I do understand their frustration with people not picking up after their dogs, especially like in and around their yard. But I like, can we at least get decorations that match? Bro, please, please. No, maybe. Okay. I learned I haven't talked about animals for a while. Actually, I feel like for a while I was talking about them every single episode. I haven't talked about them for a while, but I did learn, and I am going to post a picture so that if you're watching it on the YouTube, you can see it, of a baby porcupine. A baby porcupine. And a baby porcupine is called a porcupet. A porcupet. How adorable. I want a whole little litter of porcupets. I want an entire little box filled with porcupets. That's so cute. What a cute little name. They're also born with soft quills that get hard relatively quickly, actually. So you could have a little porcupet and you could hold it for just a moment and it would be soft and it wouldn't hurt you. But like, how cute. Some baby animals don't have cool names, but a baby porcupine, to be called a porcupet, oh my God, I'm obsessed. And who knew that? Who knew that? Nobody knew that. Nobody knew that. We all just thought they were called baby porcupines. That's just what we all thought. All right, my ache and relief of the week. My son got me he gave me, I should say, my son gave me a gigantic fern plant. It was huge. It was beautiful. It was lovely. For the life of me, I cannot keep that damn thing alive. I usually do a pretty good job keeping plants alive. Granted, I get pretty robust plants, but I do a pretty good job keeping plants alive. I have not mastered the art of propagation, but I can keep one alive. Not this damn fern. This fern dies little by little by little, and it is probably an eighth of the size that it was whenever he gave it to me. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to save it, or I don't know that this poor little plant will have a redemption arc in my story. And then that makes me sad. And I am sorry, Mr. Fern Plant. I am sorry. My relief of the week. In prepping for this week's episode, I realized a little something about how far I've actually come. And I was talking to my therapist a while ago. I don't know how long a while ago is, but a while ago, probably before the holidays. And I was talking to her about not knowing if I was going to continue the podcast or not. And she had asked me if I had gotten what I wanted out of it. And I was like, well, I mean, what I wanted to get out of it was that I wanted a podcast. So I guess I did, because I did it. There was more follow-up questions from there. But she had said, I think it's probably been kind of therapeutic for you as well. And I was like, well, I mean, I guess maybe. But in prepping for this episode and getting it all written down on the cards and stuff, I was like, oh, yeah, I have come a long, long, long way. And yes, there is some processing that I do in prepping for these episodes, right? If I'm talking about boundaries, I really have to look at what my own boundaries look like. Or if I am talking about mental health, I have to be able to like make it all make sense in my own brain about like where I have struggled with mental health and where I am doing better with mental health and how far I've come and things like that. And so this week's episode, I was able to do the same type of thing and be like, oh yeah, that looks very different 20, 25 years ago, shit, even 10 years ago than it does today. And so sometimes being able to see how far you've come is its own, like there's a lot of reward in that, right? And we don't see it day to day. When we still suffer and we still struggle, we have the ability to just get in our heads and be like, yeah, I've always been this way. But it's like, yeah, you've been some kind of way. But this way is not, you haven't always been this way. And that's kind of cool. So that's my relief of the week. Also, shout out to my therapist. She's clearly awesome. Okay. Actually, before I jump into the episode, I was talking to my cousin a handful of weeks ago, and it's no secret that her and I have had like a tumultuous relationship. And a long time ago, like years ago, we had this massive falling out, and I wrote her a letter from my perspective, from my side of things. And she got the letter, and I genuinely never heard anything about it, really. Like that was just sort of that. She brought this letter up a handful of weeks ago, And she was like, well, I just assumed your therapist told you to write that, so I didn't really think much of it. And I was actually a little offended because, like, my therapist doesn't tell me to do anything. Like, that's not what therapy is, right? My therapist is not, I mean, maybe in some places it is, right? I feel like whenever I was in the mental health hospital, things like that, or whenever I was really, really in this, like the throes of depression and self-injurious behavior and like suicidal ideations and things like that, I do feel like I left therapy with a task list, things to do, things to try, like support plans, safety plans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And even activities like to practice doing. But in this day, my therapist doesn't really send me home with activities or homework per se. And even when I've done couples counseling and stuff like that, yes, I left with homework or activities. That is not the kind of therapy that I'm getting today, or for a long time, really, right? And so when she said, I just figured your therapist told you to write it, so I didn't think anything of it because your therapist told you to do it. I was a little like, oh, I put so much of my heart and soul into that letter, not because anybody told me to, but because it mattered to me. It mattered to me that she knew these things, right? Like, not to minimize her feelings in a situation, but um, to really have a better understanding of my point of view and just my perspective on how I see things as well, right? I think that matters, right? We all are coming from a very different place. Um so anyways, that was a bummer to me to hear, but I digress. All right. This week, so I had put out in a couple different episodes and on the social media and things like that, that if there was something you wanted to hear about, talk about, learn about, blah 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 about, speak now, put it in the Google form, and people did. People really did. And so that's very cool. I had a handful of things come up about anxiety. And so I wanted to touch on anxiety. Obviously, this is something I struggle with every day in my entire life. I struggle with anxiety. And I know that my anxiety shows up differently than other people's anxiety shows up for them. So I figured I would do a little bit of my anxiety and just anxiety in general. So I don't want it to be too like preachy, like this is not my TED Talk on anxiety, but like let's just see what we can get out. So I think first and foremost, it's incredibly important to understand that anxiety is not just one thing, right? It shows up differently for people, and it could show up as this tiny little whisper that's just in the back of your mind all day, every day, that a little, like a little gnat that's very annoying and very incessant, but you can kind of function. And then there's other types of anxiety for people where it's showing up in this gigantic, like megaphone blaring, and you can't even function because you can't focus over the sound of how loud this anxiety actually is for you. So anxiety looks very, very different for everybody. It can be very, very debilitating for people where you can't even like go out, you can't function, you can't be around. I feel like people hear a lot about social anxiety, not being able to go into large crowds because there's just too much going on, things like that. But anxiety can really keep people from even being able to like get out of bed to start their day. And then other people where it can just be really, really annoying, but manageable, sort of like that little gnat that you can swat away, like it's manageable. And then, and I think that that's where I was for a long time, was that annoying, but manageable, annoying, but manageable. I think more today, in this day and age that I operate in, I feel like my anxiety shows up as more like just invisible, where people think that I'm fine because I'm really high functioning. I've learned how to work with my anxiety. So it comes off to other people as like invisible. They don't really notice it. And then when I say it, they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, true story. Um, but it's not invisible to me, right? It's very predominant in my world, and other people just don't notice. And so my my in pointing all of these different types of things out, how it shows up so differently for people, like that spectrum. And it's definitely a spectrum, right? It can show up one way for this type of situation and another way for that type of situation. Like it is on a spectrum. There's no one way. But it also is important to not compare all of this, right? Comparing anxiety from person to person to person is toxic. So toxic, because no one has it better or worse than somebody else. And there's really no leaderboard or competition. This is not something that we're competing in. Like, this is mental health, right? Anxiety is a mental health concern, and it needs to be it needs to be respected and heard from people. But we're not comparing. We are not comparing things. That is not what we do here. That would not be a safe space. So it is important to know as well that anxiety is not always like this panic attack on the floor. You're not always, if you have anxiety, you're not curled up in a fetal position on the floor, like terrified. You're not biting your nails in the corner, so petrified of what's going to happen in the whole wide world. Like, that is not how it's always showing up. It can show up in so many different ways for people. And again, like I said, on a spectrum. On a spectrum. Like, it can show up in an emotional sense in people, where people are like constantly worrying or dreading, like this constant dread about everything and anything that could go wrong. People can become very irritable whenever they're anxious about things, or really just feeling very unsafe, even when you are safe. And I would say, for me personally, my anxiety that I operate and navigate with a lot, like, it probably shows up as irritability at work. Where I'll get short and curt with people, and I don't mean to. I'll walk away and I'm like, fuck, 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 fuck. And then I start to overthink that. But like that, it'll show up as irritability. And I do definitely have a hard time feeling safe, even if I am. Right. Like, I talk a lot about safety, and safety is something that matters a lot to me, like that mentally, emotionally safe. I don't really operate in this world of like feeling physically unsafe, but I do operate in a world of feeling very emotionally and mentally unsafe all the time. Um, and that takes a lot of work to get past. Some people, anxiety can show up in a very physical way, with like tight chest and short breath, people be nauseous. You hear people talk about like stomach issues and headaches and clenching their jaw. The people will be like, oh my God, my jaw hurts so bad because I was just grinding my teeth, clenching my jaw so much in my sleep. That can be anxiety. It can be anxiety. Again, none of these things are any one indicator of. I don't typically get anxiety induced headaches. I don't get nauseous like that. I don't typically have a lot of physical symptoms of anxiety. I would say I get really exhausted from like the 24/7 fight or flight that I live in. And also constantly telling myself, right, you're not in danger. You're not in fight or flight. So feeling like you're in 24/7 fight or flight, and then having to do the mental work to tell yourself, to talk yourself off of that ledge, to say, no, you're actually not in fight or flight. You're actually safe. You can actually take a deep breath and and it's gonna be okay. Like, calm down. Calm down, Brittany, right? But I have had extreme panic attacks. After Chase died, I had a lot of panic. It was a very common thing to have a panic attack, to just be driving down the street and get in my head, and then starting to hyperventilate, not being able to breathe, crying hysterically to where I'm like choking on my own sobs and things like that, and having to pull over. There have been a couple times a long time ago where I would end up, I had to go to the emergency room a couple different times because like I couldn't stop a panic attack. And so I needed to go get help to like calm down, to like, because I could not, I was like hyperventilating at work and stuff. So that has obviously been a very, very long time ago, very, very long time ago. But I've had my moments where it shows up physically like that. But I would say my anxiety shows up a lot emotionally. It's an emotional sort of anxiety. And then like some of the behavioral components of how anxiety is showing up, like when people are suffering from anxiety, like avoidance, check, over preparing. That is not me, but I know people, right? And you get that with like your people, like perfectionism is a sign of anxiety. People pleasing is a sign of anxiety. Procrastination, also me, check. And like that doom scrolling. The doom scroll for somebody with anxiety, the doom scroll on social media is not because people are lazy and not because they don't think they have something better to do, but the doom scroll is like this constant dopamine hit that's going to your brain, and you are entertained by it in very short little bursts. And so in those short little bursts, your brain does not have an opportunity to think about the things that it needs to be, or that it wants to be thinking about. You're right. It probably doesn't need to be thinking about those things either, but it wants to. It wants to think deeply about all of those things. It wants to ruminate over all of the conversations. So behaviorally, there are a lot of things that are driven by anxiety. I definitely avoid things. I definitely procrastinate. Like, I avoid going to entire cities in the state of Colorado because the rattlesnake might be in them. Like, that is insane. that is actually insane, right? Like, the likelihood of me running into her, are always possible. She lives down the road, so it's always possible. But I avoid entire cities in the state of Colorado because of the rattlesnake. I avoid entire, like some of the festivals and things that go on in cities in the summertime. I avoid those because I know she's at a lot of them for her work. So I don't go to those because I don't want to walk by her. I am hyper vigilant at the airport, hyper vigilant at the airport because I don't want to see her, right? There's always a possibility of me seeing her, and I don't want to see her at the airport. So I avoid a lot of things. To avoid people, to avoid circumstances, to avoid situations that can be anxiety inducing, that I know that will take such a huge mental toll on me. But I spend a lot of time working on avoiding those types of things, which is, probably not healthy, but, my mental health and peace by not running into her on that day, that's pretty great. Anxiety can show up in different types of thought patterns for different people. Catastrophizing doesn't sound right when I say it. A lot of the what if spirals. What if this happens? What if I see her? What if she talks to me? What if she comes to yell at me? What if, right? I talked about it a couple of months ago whenever I had to go pick up cat litter that had been delivered to my other house. And the whole way there, I was in like this pure panic mode about it because what if she saw me? What if she was there? What would I say? Could I just walk by her? Like, what if, right? I created an entire scenario that may or may not ever happen. It didn't happen, right? I spent a lot of time thinking about worst case scenarios there and the what ifs that never even happened. Replaying conversations. I am the overthinker. I often tell people, especially at work, I tell people like I operate on an anxiety level of like 110. Anybody that's ever supervised me knows that I operate on a level of like 110. Um, and I just replay all of the conversations and I overthink everything that could go wrong. And God forbid you plop a meeting on my calendar that I was not prepared for, like a check-in. Why are we checking in? What did I do wrong? Am I getting fired? Like, why would I get fired? Did I do something to get fired? No, I didn't do anything to get fired. Is that where my brain goes all the time? Yes. Very much. So replaying all of the conversations. Could I have done that better? Could I have done that worse? Right? I talked about like that work situation that really kind of sent me into a moment really kind of wondering if I wasn't if I was too chalant, right? Which we stand by 2026 is year of chalant AF. But I talked a lot about that situation in that episode, replaying the conversations, and it had me really in feeling some kind of way and not a good way. And hypervigilance. I said that too. I definitely get very hypervigilant about things. Planning funerals for people who are just late. I would say my children are the bearers of that type of anxiety often, right? Like, especially since Chase died. Like, it's very much like, oh, you didn't respond to a text, you're dead. You died. You obviously are deceased. You didn't get home timely enough. You obviously got in a car accident. So they are definitely the ones that falls onto. Poor kids. I've talked about pulling them out of school because of dreams that I had. That is anxiety. That is my anxiety getting into my brain, right? I had this dream. It was a terrible dream. So what if something terrible happens to my children at school? I need to pull them out of school and I need to keep them so safe. By me, I need to know that they are safe. So that shows up. That's always been a thing. And it can be tricky. I think anxiety can be tricky for loved ones around us that maybe don't know or don't realize, don't know how to navigate that, don't really understand the why. Like, why are you this way? I don't know. I ask myself that every day. Anxiety can come from a lot of different places, though. Anxiety can come from trauma. Hi, pick me. From childhood instability. Hi, I'm Brittany. That's me too. Emotional neglect. We're just ticking off the boxes. Tick, tick, tick. From chaos, whether that's as a child, as an adult, right? I think like it is also important to say, and I will say it now, like anxiety, you might have grown up with no anxiety. I would say I've been navigating anxiety for a long, long time. But anxiety can just show up. You can be wandering around, living your very normal life to the best of your ability, and then something happens. And now all of a sudden, anxiety starts to creep up. So it's not something that you're not born with it. You're not, this is not in your DNA. This is not something that you have always. It's something that can really kind of come up because of any of these things, right? You don't always just have childhood trauma. Some people have adulthood trauma. Some people have trauma from a divorce. Some people have trauma from, losing, like the death of their parents, right? Sometimes the death of a parent is, you're not like as an adult, right? If you lose your parent as an adult, sometimes that is still equally as hard. So that can cause some trauma depending on how that came to be. So it's important to realize that as well, that it can just be whenever. Living in survival mode, that survival mode, yes, you could be living in survival mode as a child. You could be in a relationship where you're living in survival mode that you can't get out of. You could have a job where you're navigating your job in survival mode because the psychological safety is so far gone in your workplace that now when you go to work, it's bringing up anxiety. So anxiety can come in so many different ways. But me personally, mine's coming from started young. We're starting young here. Medical stuff can bring up anxiety. It doesn't even have to be your own medical stuff, right? Like if you have a parent that's diagnosed with some sort of severe medical situation, you as the child are dealing with that, and that can create a lot of anxiety. And then obviously if it's your own, that like I don't go to the doctor. Right? I talked about that earlier in the year whenever they thought I might have had breast cancer. Like, yikes, I'm avoiding this at all costs. This is terrifying. Speaking of, they've been calling me for 2 months to reschedule an appointment, and I have not done that yet. I will need to do that. I digress. And then being strong for everybody else can create anxiety as well, right? When you're the go-to all the time and you're the catch-all for all the things, it creates anxiety that you also can't have your own feelings and thoughts and have your own emotions and have your own things that are bothering you, because who's going to catch you? Who's going to support you? Who's there for you? So that can create anxiety as well. And I think I have that as well. I would say, not I think, I would say I have a little bit of that as well, because who do I have? We've learned that I don't have my parents. We've learned that even when I wanted to be able to lean on my dad about some of this stuff surrounding Chase's death, I wasn't able to do that. So, um, who do I have? I can't, my kids are kids. Like they're adults, but I don't get to put all of my stuff onto my children. That would give them more anxiety than they need. And they already have plenty to worry about. So, anxiety is your nervous system telling you that it wasn't safe to relax. And now it's hard to know when you are okay and it is safe to relax. And so anxiety just kind of showed up. It showed up thinking it was going to protect you. Like if I worry enough about it, I can prevent it from happening. Or if I prepare for the worst, I won't be blindsided by anything else when it comes. But instead of protecting you, what it's really doing is stealing your sleep. It's stealing your joy. It's stealing your peace. And it's keeping you from being present in the moment because you're so busy worrying about the would've, like the could'ves, the what ifs, like preparing for the worst at all times, that you aren't able to just be present and enjoy this moment. For people that have social anxiety, to be like, oh, what if this and this and this happens in this large room full of people? So now I'm just not going to go into this large room full of people. You're missing out. You're missing out on opportunities with your friends. You're missing out on, celebrations that could be had, or you're really just not enjoying them to the best of your ability. And then, I lose a lot of sleep to my anxiety. I talked about it a couple episodes ago, right? Like to just wake up and immediately my brain is running a million miles an hour through all of the things at work. Like, girl, you're not even at work. You are in your pajamas in your bed. It's okay. It's okay. There can be a lot of shame in anxiety, kind of the like, why am I this way? And like I said a bit ago, if your partner, you're in a relationship, or your parents, or whoever you spend your life with as an adult, like whoever that is, if they don't really get it, and you have to explain it to them, then you get in your own head, second guessing it and trying to explain it. And you're like, why am I this way? And other people can handle this, so why can't I handle this? And other people would have handled that better, so why didn't I handle that better? And all of that just makes you more anxious. All of it makes you more anxious. So what helps? What do we do? Us little anxiety-ridden creatures, what do we do? I think that depends person to person, to be totally honest, right? I have spent a lot of time in therapy, and so there's a lot of things I process in therapy to even be able to just get it out on the table, right? If I can just get it out on the table and sort of compartmentalize it. And sometimes I need a sounding board to compartmentalize it because my cat's not helping me compartmentalize. Sometimes, not often. So I need some help. So therapy, being able to talk it through, being able to journal it. Some people do take medication for anxiety. I have taken medication for anxiety at one moment in time. It was lovely. It was lovely to not be so worried all the time. It was a very brief moment that I took medication for anxiety. And truth be told, I was really worried about taking medication for anxiety because it was like, oh, this does such a good job calming my brain cells. I like it a lot. And maybe I like this too much. So we're just gonna not do that. We're just gonna not do that. And again, that could be my anxiety. Like, just because my parents were addicts and my family has a history of addicts and my brothers are addicts, that doesn't mean that I'm an addict. But like, could I be? Maybe. I don't know. We're not going to dabble in that. We're going to stay far, far, far away from that because that seems really scary, really scary. Meditation can help with anxiety. Acupuncture can help with anxiety. Going to the gym can help with anxiety, right? There's so many things that can help with anxiety, and it is really person to person, but it can be small things like a walk, right? Or it could be something more extreme that is needed, like medication and therapy and treatment, right? Because like I said, it shows up very, very differently. If you are that person who has anxiety to the point where you can't even get out of bed, me telling you to get up and go for a walk that's not helpful. And then you're going to have even more anxiety because now you're stressed out about the fact that you can't get out of bed. And what are people going to think of you? And are they going to think that you're lazy? Or are they going to think that you didn't try? Are they going to think that you didn't care? Are they going to think that you weren't listening to them? You see what I'm doing here? Like, it sucks. So what helps is different from person to person. Like I said, I go to therapy. I spend a lot of time with my animals. Um, I do get out. I can deep breathe. I can be in circumstances. I have so many fidget toys. They really help in high pressure instances while I'm at work and things are creeping up. And I am quick to tell people how much anxiety I have because my personal point of view is that if you know that I have anxiety and I'm telling you what I need to minimize that, then you can help me, right? Like, this is me sort of helping myself by communicating what my needs are. So please don't just plop a meeting on my calendar. Please call me up and say, hey, Brittany, no need to worry. I'm going to put this meeting on your calendar because I want to brainstorm ideas to do XYZ. Oh, cool. Amazing. Can't wait. That feels very different. So, I have learned to articulate what my needs are. And that's just kind of me. Anxiety does not mean that you're broken. It means that you have adapted to the way your world is, right? My anxiety, I have to view it as like a sign of strength, that it kept me alive. It is like that I learned too much, too young, that I survived some really real shit. And that matters. I've lost a lot because I didn't know how to navigate surviving real shit. And so then you lose more. And so that builds onto it. And so I would say, that's my anxiety. My anxiety is just a sign of something that kept me alive. Right? I know that because my anxiety is what it is, right? I'll give a little snippet, a little something. My brother, I knew he was struggling, and because I have such a long-standing history with mental health and depression and my own suicide attempts and things like that, knowing that my brother was struggling, I was very hypervigilant and I worried incessantly about him. And when I didn't hear from him immediately, right, it hadn't even been 12 hours since I had heard from him last. Instantaneously, I knew something was wrong. I knew that there was a problem, and I rushed over to his house and I found him. So there is something in there, like that the anxiety that I have, it's done well for me. I don't know. It's a weird way of phrasing that, but because my anxiety operates that way, I do listen to it. I feel like it has a place and I feel like it matters. Because if I would have just let that one go, like, pass, like, oh, he'll get back to you later, right? Like, my family was like, well, he's at work, Brittany. No, he's not. I know he's not. I know he's not at work. So, there was a lot of anxiety and not being able to hear from him. And so I took action on that anxiety. I was right. So I would say, I guess if I'm being honest, anxiety has been one of the longest relationships in my entire life. It's been with me in the chaos years, and it's been with me in the grief years. It's been with me in the I'm fine, but not actually fine years. And in the quiet moments where my life finally slowed down enough. And then my nervous system was like, cool. So, when does the bad thing happen again? For a long time, I thought that I was broken and that there was something really wrong with me. But I'm realizing and I'm understanding something much softer in all of this. And that is that my anxiety didn't show up because I'm weak. It showed up because I survived things that required me to be strong before I was ready to be strong, before I should have had to have been strong, to be honest. It learned my story before I did, and it learned how to protect me before I had words for what I was living through. And yeah, it's messy sometimes. Sometimes it still keeps me up at night, replaying conversations and planning funerals for the people that are just, late or busy or not on my timetable. But I don't want to spend my life hating a part of me that kept me alive. So I'm not trying to cure my anxiety. I'm learning to listen to it, to thank it, and to gently teach it that I'm safe now. Easier said than done. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, cool, Brittany, cool, that must be nice. I'm very much still not safe. I see you. You don't have to be healed to be worthy of rest. You don't have to be brave to be loved. And you don't have to have it all figured out to belong here with us. We are not fixing ourselves today. We're just learning how to be a little kinder to the parts of us that carried us through hell. And honestly, that feels like a really good place to start to me. So that's what I have to say about our friend anxiety. Anxiety. How's that song go? Anyways, new episodes out every Monday. Until then, don't be afraid to be great. Toodles, poodles. Bye.